want to kind of make a connection with you on some of the things that we talked about earlier this year. Now, the book Hatchet, Corbin, what was the book Hatchet about?
I don't know. I can't remember.
What was the book Hatchet about?
About a little boy named Brian, and he was going to his daddy, and the plane crashed.
Okay, so what was the key thing that we said he had to do? Starts with an S.
Survive.
Survive. So survival was the key thing for Brian. But we also talked about that he had to persevere. What does that mean, Mary Avis? What did we say that meant? What?
Keep going.
To keep going, to keep the faith, never what? Give. Okay, so we also talked about this year, because what we talked about in Unit 1, and that's what we're referring back to, was that there's another story called The Hiding Place, Evan. Do you remember that book? Okay, who was the key character in The Hiding Place? Corey ten Boom. Now, why is it important for us to talk about Corey ten Boom and perseverance, Cariana? What did Corey do to persevere?
She, like, when the Nazis came and had to get the Jews, she said that there are consequences behind it.
Okay, so the Nazis came and they took the Jews, and she knew there would be consequences, and she still what? Helped them to survive. And what's interesting about that is she didn't have to, did she? And nor did the rest of her family, but they decided to do that, right? Okay, so that's the connection we're trying to make today. So today I'm going to talk to you about a book called The Book Thief that I would love for us to get into more. It's not an easy book to read in the sense that you really have to think about it when you're reading it, but it has some great stories about a girl named Liesel. Okay, I know that's a strange name for you, but it's a German name, okay? And Liesel, I don't know if you can see it. I'll turn the light out so you can see. This is kind of a visual for you, and then I'll turn it back on. So Liesel is from Nazi Germany, okay? And first we're going to talk about, she grew up in Nazi Germany, but through her experiences, what I hope for you to learn is even more about what perseverance means. To never what? And a different perspective that I don't know you've ever kind of thought about. And it has a lot to do with, today we have a lot of freedoms, right, in this country. Well, what does freedom really mean? And what does it mean to persevere and have that freedom? Liesel has a very difficult life in the 1930s. Back then, in the late 30s, there was a horrible disease called the whooping cough. Does anybody know what that means? What that was? Anybody? Okay, it was this terrible disease that overtook your lungs, coughed terribly, and you usually died from it, especially children, okay? And her brother got the whooping cough, okay? It was her mother and her brother, and they were very poor, and it was a very bad situation. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to read you an excerpt from the book, okay? And what I want you to do is after you read the excerpt, we're going to turn and talk, okay? Any questions? So listen very carefully because I'm going to ask you a very interesting question about this excerpt. All right, when the coughing stopped, there was nothing but the nothingness of life moving on with a shuffle or a near silent twitch. A suddenness found its way into his lips then, which were a corroded brown color and peeling like old paint, in desperate need of redoing. Their mother was asleep. I entered the train. My feet stepped through the cluttered aisle, and my palm was over his mouth in an instant. No one noticed. The train galloped on, except the girl. With one eye open, one still in a dream, the book thief, also known as Liesel Meminger, could see without question that her younger brother, Werner, was now sideways and dead. His blue eyes stared at the floor, seeing nothing. Prior to waking up, the book thief was dreaming about the Führer, Adolf Hitler. In the dream, she was attending a rally at which she spoke, looking at the skull-colored part in his hair and the perfect square of his mustache. She was listening contently to the torrent of words spilling from his mouth. His sentences glowed in the light. In a quieter moment, he actually crouched down and smiled at her. She returned the smile and said in German, Guten Tag, Herr Führer, which, by the way, I don't know how to say that. She hadn't learned to speak too well or even to read, because she had rarely frequented school. The reason for that, she would find out in due course. Just as the Furrer was about to reply, she woke up. It was January 1939. She was 9 years old, soon to be 10, and her brother was dead. All right. Now, my question to you is, who is telling the story of Lysel and her family? What point of view is this being told in? Who's telling the story of Lysel and her family, and what point of view is this being told in? You have 1 minute, talk and turn. Go.
Yeah, but if he was talking about himself, but he telling the story of him. Yeah, but he would say he said, he said, I would say that was a girl. That was a girl.
30 seconds.
Girl, what do you think?
That girl. Hey, Miss HULSEY, come here.
Yeah, but she was living.
I saw that girl's name.
Lysel, L-I-E-S-E-L. 10 seconds.
I'm saying third person. Yeah, because you could hear the other.
Either way,
Right
it'd
now,
be third person.
Okay, time. Now, stop what you're doing and listen. Now, we know that Lysel's brother, Werner, has passed away, correct? And after he passes away, her mother and her go to the cemetery, and what are they going to do? Bury him, okay? So I'm going to read you another excerpt to kind of give you a little bit more insight on what's going on. So after her brother passes, Lysel and her mother leave the cemetery to journey on a train to Lysel's new home. So listen carefully. This is a big excerpt, okay? They held hands. A final soaking farewell was let go of, and they turned and left the cemetery, looking back several times. Use your imagery to think back of what's going on. As for me, I remained a few moments longer. I waved. No one waved back at me. Mother and daughter vacated the cemetery and made their way toward the next train to Munich. Both were skinny and pale. Both had sores on their lips. Lysel noticed it in the dirty, fogged-up window of the train when they boarded just before midday. In the written words of the book thief herself, the journey continued like everything had happened. When the train pulled into Bahnhof in Munich, the passengers slid out as if from a torn package. There were people of every stature, but among them the poor were the most easily recognized. The impoverished always try to keep moving, as if relocating might help. They ignore the reality that a new version of the same old problem will be waiting at the end of the trip. The relative cringed to kiss. I think her mother knew this quite well. She wasn't delivering her children to the higher echelons of Munich, but a foster home had apparently been found. And if nothing else, the new family could at least feed the girl and the boy a little better and educate them properly. The boy. Lysel was sure her mother carried the memory of him slung over her shoulder. She dropped him. She saw his feet and legs and his body slap the platform. How could that woman walk? How could she move? That's the sort of thing I'll never know or comprehend, what humans are capable of. She picked him up and continued walking, the girl clinging now to her side. Authorities were met and questions of lateness, and the boy raised their vulnerable heads. Lysel remained in the corner of the small, dusty office as her mother sat with clenched thoughts on a very hard chair. There was the chaos of goodbye. It was a goodbye that was yet wet with tears, with the girl's head buried into the woolly worn shallows of her mother's coat. There had been some more dragging. Quite away beyond the outskirts of Munich, there was a town called Mulching. Said best by the likes of you and me as Molking. That's where they were taking her, to a street by the name of Himmel. Now, here you can see that Lysel's world has what? What's it done? Changed dramatically, right? And if you think about the images that I just described to you, it's pretty horrific. Okay, so what I want you to do is I want you to think about, as death takes over her life, she's decided Well, has she decided? Can she make it? What's she gonna do? Is this perseverance or is it survival? Turn and talk. Got 1 minute.
I'm sure that sounds like she's being taken to.
Is this perseverance or is it survival? Or could it be both? You tell me.
Yeah, but she's taking hers.
Sad
You're supposed to
story.
be videoing her.
Sad story.
Hers. There's like away from your mother.
I didn't do that.
Yeah, but
I should know. I should try
Okay, you got 30 seconds.
okay.
Because it'd be perseverance.
You said it's
Because
So what person was that with them?
survival would be
10 seconds.
But most of them, she's without her mother.
All right, time. All right. Now, listen. Life of the world has changed, okay? It's dramatically different. She went from having a mother and a brother to apparently being sent somewhere else, correct? We're not talking about where that was yet, but think about what I read to you. And now her whole world is changing. So her brother's dead. She watched him die. She saw that he went through what all he went through. Now let's go back to what we learned in Corrie ten Boom's life about the Nazis. Communism, what it means to be communist. Now not only was her world falling apart, but the communist regime was gaining power and strength, right? So there were limitations to what she could do, what she couldn't do, what her freedom was, what her freedom was not. And so not only was her life changing personally in her own little world, but outside of her little world. It was very different. There were rules and restrictions. The thing that she loved the most was to read. That was her escape. And her foster father read to her. Now, they didn't have but one book, and the one book they have came from the gravesite where her brother was buried. It was called the Grave Digger's Book. Now, that's sad, when the only book you have to read is the Grave Digger's Book. And any book she could find, she would search for. Now, her father, her foster dad, could not read well, okay? So it was hard for him, but they worked together on helping him learn how to read and her learn more about words and escaping what reality they were in, even in a grave digger's book. So her enjoyment came from her father, Hans. His name is Hans Huberman, and anything at all about reading was pleasurable to them. All right, so I'm going to read an excerpt. Before I read that, you need to know that in Germany, in the Nazi wartime, Hitler said and declared that all books were bad. They were banned. You could not have your own books, and they will be burned. They will be burned. All right. Lysel wandered toward the mountain of ash. It sat like a magnet, like a freak, irresistible to the eyes, similar to the road of yellow stars. As with her previous urge to see the mound's ignition, she could not look away. All alone, she didn't have the discipline to keep a safe distance. It sucked her toward it, and she began to make her way around. Above her, the sky was completing its routine of darkening, but far away, over the mountain shoulder, there was a dull trace of light. "Pass off kind," a uniform said to her at one point. "Look out, child," as he shoveled some more ash onto a cart. Closer to the town hall, under light, some shadows stood and talked, most likely exulting in the success of the fire. From Lysel's position, their voices were only sounds. not words at all. For a few minutes, she watched the men shoveling up the pile, at first making it smaller at the sides to allow for more to collapse. They came back and forth from a truck, and after 3 return trips, when the heap was reduced near the bottom, a small section of living material slipped from inside the ash. Now listen. Perhaps they were damp. Perhaps the fire didn't burn long enough to fully reach the depth where they sat. Whatever the reason, there were huddled among the ashes shaken survivors. 3 books. Lysel spoke softly, and she looked at them. All right. Now, here's the question I want you to think about for just a second. What do you think Lysel is about to do? Why do you believe she is? And is this perseverance? What do you think she's about to do, and why? And is this perseverance? Talk in turn, go. You got 1 minute.
Okay, so the first question.
You gotta talk. Gotta hear you talk. Come on. Talk about it.
She's doing it because it is personal, but it lets her get out of the world that she's in.
That's her passion. Why do you think
It lets her get out of the world that she's in.
What's she gonna do? Why do you think she's doing it? And is this perseverance? 30 seconds.
'Cause
I don't hear you talking. Are we finished? 10 seconds.
Take the books. She could have just
She could like
they're gonna burn the books in for life.
All right, time. Okay, now let's talk about what all we've talked and turned about, I guess, for the past few minutes. Who was talking? Who was the narrator of the book so far? Somebody in Cariana's group, what'd you put? What do you think? Who was the narrator for the first question I asked you? Who do y'all think it was?
There was a narrator who said Lysel's name, and then there was her.
Okay, but who was it? Who do you think it was? Anybody want to take a guess? So I'm going to tell you who it was. It was Death.
Yeah, what?
Listen, I want you to listen. Listen to what I'm telling you. Listen real close. My feet stepped through the cluttered aisle, and my palm was over his mouth in an instant. No one noticed. The train galloped on, except the girl. So it was Death taking Werner with him.
That is rude.
That's deep. Okay, now, from what we've learned, I wanted you to realize that because the whole perspective of this book, The Book Thief, is about Death speaking to us about what happened to Lysel in her life, okay? It's a very interesting book. Now, tell me why what we learned so far, it tells you a lot about perseverance and if it is different than what you've learned before. Patricia, tell me what you discussed about it. What y'all discussed about perseverance? With Lysel. We talked, what did we say? What I asked you? Say it. Come on, say it. Huh? Okay, what did she have to persevere? What did you all say? Why? Yes.
because she lost her family members.
She lost a family member. Did she have a choice about perseverance?
Yeah.
What? Did she?
Yes.
Okay, what was her choice? She could, what? Stop, or what did you say? Somebody said something. What did you say? Keep going? Okay, what did she choose? to keep going. We saw that, right? Even in the small excerpts that we read. All right, good. Okay, the second thing was, why do you think that she cared about the book so much?
She wanted more stories.
What?
She wanted more stories.
Okay. Do you think, what? She wanted to learn more. Why do you think, compared to her life, why do you think she wanted to learn more? She didn't what? What did we learn about her? She didn't have a what? Education. We learned that, didn't we? Okay, what else? She didn't have her, for lack of a better word, real family to help support her. She has a new family that she's got to adjust to, right? So why do you think the books and burning the books became so important? Because truly, we know in Nazi Germany, from what we've already read, this is a huge problem if you go against the Nazis, right? So she's endangering herself, isn't she? We don't know how much yet. We haven't figured that out yet. But we know she's endangering herself. What was she about to do? What was she about to do? Steal some books, right? How many did she have? 3. And she thought they were damp enough she could grab them, right? Okay, so perseverance. How is this relating to what we've learned about perseverance? Somebody sum it up for me. Not everybody at once. Gonna pick you. Evan! Sum it up. How's this perseverance relating to what we learned about in Hatchet, what we learned about with the hiding place in Fort Tinder?
Because she's still going, even though she lost her daughter.
She's still going, right? All the odds are what? Against her. Have you ever thought about perseverance in this way, though? She's going to persevere to save something, right? And it's not a person, is it? It's a thing, isn't it? So her freedoms are the things that she's trying to save, right? What did Corey do? Save a person along with those freedoms, right? But there were actually people that she was saving. What was Brian doing? Saving
His life.
himself, right? But this is very abstract, isn't it? It's something you can't see. You can see the book, but the whole meaning of it is what? Persevering for a cause. So this truly shows that, doesn't it? While they both, in the other 2 stories, were for a cause, this was actually what? Even more so, because it wasn't a person that she went and saved, it was a book. But that book saved people in the long run,